Good night. It's the 17th of February 2025. You're welcome back. Just a few wee things to clarify here because there's no point in me continually giving out details if I don't answer questions in relation to them and objections to them. But before I do that, I may say that this is the 17th, the evening of the 17th of January, and it looks like this will be the last day of the incarceration in the ordinary sense of my a person that I've campaigned for years, the Native American Leonard Peltier from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, who has completed 50 years in a federal prison. He may have done it, he may have not, he denies it, but whether he did or not, 50 years is long enough. He's a Native American, he was one of the first people there, and I always feel that their land was stolen from them. And so it's not as simple as it might look in the ordinary case. Not only that, if it was this side of the Atlantic, a fella convicted for murder, and that would get out after 15 years and be given a house. Shows you the difference in the two countries. But I'm glad that I understand he will be getting out under special conditions to go back to his home, was what I always campaigned for in South Dakota, to get back home to his home in the Pine Ridge while he still has a few years left. He's not in great health either. He's 80 years of age. So I just want to say this is the last year of 50 years of incarceration. It's a tough world. It's not an easy world on people, good, bad or indifferent, or no matter what they do. And I'm not minimizing the effect on the families of the people who died, but the American Indian Wars are a long, sore, and a lot of injustice was carried out over that period. So that's some bit of bright news. Now, I want to move on to the main point here. It was on the pylons. I made a video on the north-south interconnector. Very important I get my view on that and that I answer the responses here. There is a thing, before I do that, I believe that there are a type of people who never can understand complex issues. I have some friends, put it like that, or people who I know well, who just cannot get across. I cannot understand anything complex. You couldn't explain it to them. And don't forget, there are many a father and maybe many a mother who had a chemist shop and had a son or daughter who couldn't qualify. Many's a doctor would like to have his children qualified and they couldn't. Many's a farmer, his kids couldn't qualify, and many's a farmer, his kids could and become more qualified to them. That's how the brain box is distributed. It doesn't mean anyone's any the better or any the worse as such, but that's what frequently happens. And so I find myself continually trying to explain reality to some people. And what it must be remembered that the wise way for someone like me to behave is to get involved in business and in things like stock markets, engineering problems and all that. And I'm constantly using my brain to solve engineering problems, to solve financial problems, to solve legal problems and everything else. And it works pretty well for me when I get down and knuckle down to it, although it gets a bit tiresome at times. In any event, Jim Carr breaks the rule again that you should comment on the video that's topical, not something else. But he does ask the question, why can't we have a referendum on migration? And there's two answers to that. One is our Constitution, the Irish Constitution, which is largely modelled on the American Constitution, does not have a provision for migration. It leaves it to the government. In America, at the first part of the 20th century, America did regulate migration. It sent home nearly, according to Ellis Island, and I was in it, up to 12% of people who tried to get into the United States through Ellis Island were rejected. So it filtered them. That's what we are saying. They should be filtered. There should be an assessment made. Now, so also it may be certain. How do you regulate who the government allows in? So there is no constitutional provision. If you make a challenge in the courts, you'll undoubtedly lose because there isn't a provision in the courts. It's only when the migration becomes a severe problem for the existing people that you expect the democratic process to work. However, the hard fact is that I'm going to stop speaking to people I meet on the street because they are determined to push this migration. It is not the case that the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Sinn Féin government want migration and the people don't. The people are craving for it. Up in Nobber in County Meath, not far from me, they can't wait to hear more migrants coming, provided they don't arrive into their community. Provided it's into Dublin or Roscommon or Carrickmacross. They don't give a damn where they go, but they want them in. They love them in, and they love their Helen McEntee, but they want them in. And I went and stood for election, and I got all right, but not enough. So it's the people wants this migration. It may disgust us big time, and they vote for the parties that does it, and that's democracy. So it's not in the Constitution. It is a scandal what's happening. It's so sad for our country, and it makes a complete liar of everything we were taught at school about our national identity and everything else. So enough spent on that. Now, Kieran Fitzpatrick makes the point about this thing about what was reported in the Irish Times. What was done with the pylons before, what it was intended to do, was way leave under the Electricity Act 1927. It's section 15, I think. Judge Max Barrett wrote a lot about it in the case of the North-South Interconnector, North-East Pylon Pressure Group versus Burplanola and Airgrid at the time, about way leave and what way leave means and all of that and how it works. And he spoke about the concept of an interloper. That's all legal stuff, but in any event, the Airgrid intend to go, instead of going for that way leave point, which has certain legal documents have to be served, but they don't do it as a rule. It's not much. You wouldn't block them doing it on your land, but now they're going to go for compulsory purchase. Now, I don't know would this be in the case of building a hut. Supposing they wanted to build some kind of a room every so often or that, they might need some kind of compulsory purchase for that. Normally, they don't need it for wires and cabling. That's the normal thing. So it's a new development. We're not sure what it is, but to say they're going to take the land because the farmers are no good, I don't know how much they'll take. They could only take what's needed. It'd be like road widening. So I can't go any more than that. How they would justify compulsory purchase when there was already a legal process by the way of way leave is a legal point that would have to be considered. Now, Walter Rankin, these are all probably just usernames. They're all right, doesn't matter. Ask the question about the life of a wind turbine. There are wind turbines at Gartanan near Baleabor built about 2003, and they're now 22 years, and they're still going around. The bearings of some of them have been replaced at enormous expense. The whole neckel, the whole part of the top has been replaced. They're still going around, but the best opinion on that is Gordon Hughes of Edinburgh University, who explains how the output of these turbines reduces over time. It goes down, and it goes down at a certain rate, so that what you get from them after 15 years is not as good as in the early years. But that's the truth. They do go down. The lifespan 15 to 20 years. Well, on the counts of most of them is 20 years. Now they're getting them for 30 years because they must have some idea that they are going to refit them above or do something, repair with them after maybe half their life, about 15 years. But the ones that in my area, and the original ones, are all about 20 to 25 years. Rara is 25 years. So they could still be going around with treatment here and treatment there. Where the big problem arises if one of the main bearings goes in them, then they have trouble. And there's two of them given a very strange kind of a sound this last year. So that's the story. It is that. But it must be remembered about the lifetime of a turbine. What my claim is, it doesn't matter if they never went round. These do not operate on producing electricity. They're a financial scam that I have partly worked out. Once they're up, you have to have something there that you can see it. They're a financial scam, and therefore they're just the excuse for the financial scam. Now, Edward Brady, these could be usernames, states, it's hard to believe that wind farms are losing money, so I'm going to make a one of that here below. I'm making a wee note here, just on a piece of paper, folks, one here below, so we'll deal with that. Paddy Mackie Mickey, says you're objecting to pylons and you have no internet, and there's a conflict of interest. If I could be caught out in making a statement that contradicted one another, you would prove that I wasn't intelligent. In fact, one of the most intelligent people in the country. I won't say what ranking, but that would be very serious. So you're not going to catch me on that, and I'm going to explain it. So then, now another man here talks about who owns the land. Who owns the land, and Western Australia. Well, while Australia is a common law country, which is Ireland, we do have different laws. The law on private ownership of land is that you own the land with the exception of the mineral rights. You do not own the mineral rights in Ireland. So if there's oil, coal or gas found under your land, they have to give you certain payments and disrupt you, but you own nothing. That is proven in the Mahercloon area of Carrickmacross in County Monaghan, where gypsum have mines there. There's an area in that area of about 9 miles square, 9 miles by 9 miles, if you understand, not 81 square miles, roughly, and maybe a little less. It would start roughly at Cabra Castle, if you're ever there. Cabra Castle is sitting right on top of a big gypsum mine, a big gypsum deposit. And if you ever notice, if you're in it, there's a sort of a dryness in the air. That dampness you get in many parts of Ireland is not there. That's because the gypsum is a dry product and it tends to make the air feel a bit drier. And underneath that land is gypsum. So they don't mine it there. But when you go on over the Carrickmacross Road, you come to where the football pitch is in Mahercloon, and all over there. And that is a big area of gypsum, and it's open cast, and it's ordinary mines and all that. I actually cocked hay and made hay where the open cast mine is before it was open. But the thing about it is the farmer has no say. Once what the farmers discovered was that don't object to it, or do object to it. And most people like the gypsum because it's a great employer in the area, but they say that they have the rights to the minerals, but they don't have the right to come into bore. So if you're the owner of land and they say, we're coming in to bore on your land, if you say no, you can't get in, they can't dig down and they don't know how deep it is. So they drill down and drill right down until they come out to the muck the far side. They know the width of the gyp rock that's there. You understand? So that to say that, we'll not go into that legal point of it, but you don't own the mineral rights. But for the land on the top, you do own it, unless it can be taken from you by compulsory purchase. Do you understand? It can also, your land can be transgressed in emergencies. So the fire brigade could travel across your land if there was a fire. That type of thing, the Gardaí are not prevented going in your land for emergencies as well. That's only common sense, not a deal with anybody, not a big deal with anybody. But you do own the land other than that. And if you die intestate, if you have any relative, they can claim it. And if there's nobody able to claim it, it goes to the state. So the state is ultimately the full owner, and it's the full guarantee of possession, but the state will not normally move in on private land without the consent of the person. Do you understand? Have I explained that fairly well? Australian law, I don't know, I have no idea. I can't go there. Now that leaves me with the two things to deal with here, and that is Edward Brady and Paddy Mickey. So we'll deal with Eddie's first. It's hard to believe they're losing money. The windmills, well, this is the situation. Wind farms cost a certain amount, which we'll say, without too much checking, is the same as conventional plant. So if you build a wind farm, 100 megawatts, and you build, we'll say, a gas plant, 100 megawatts, the gas plant can run 100% of the time. 100% of the time, because you might say there's repair, but you see, if you have, they're in gangs, usually gangs along. If you have 20 generators with engine, with what do you call them, turbines driving them, steam turbines driving them, or whatever, or gas turbines, you have 20 generators there, you can shut down one. So you always are listening for one or two that might be just that good, and you can keep checking them. So you can repair 2 of them and leave the other 18 running. So you can't use this term capacity in the ordinary sense, because the capacity would be 18 out of 20. It wouldn't be 20 out of 20. So you can argue then that they might shut down a huge, big generator, or big boiler. That would be at money point. The boiler, if it went down, it could be hold up the thing for a while. But there'd be several boilers at the that they could have one or two running on the big same site. So the thing about a conventional electricity generating, you can have as heavy as equipment, as awkward equipment, as noisy equipment, and as much of it as you want on the one plinth, with the one staff and the one control center. And so effectively, you're getting 100% of the generation. So you put in you spend your money, you spend your, what would you say, 50 million, and it's generating constantly. So you have a return every hour of every day. Does that make sense? As you want to replace one part of it, you can replace a bit of it without replacing the other, so you don't have to shut it down. So if you're the company running it, you have a constant stream of income. Okay. Now, with wind, you have only at best 20%. Why? Because I didn't make the wind. I have no say in it. You could blame me for the wind not blowing. The wind is blowing the same it always blew. And it's not a case that it just comes on full blast for 20% and then goes off. It comes on low and low and low. So an awful lot of the time, the turbines might only producing maybe 1/3 of their capacity. But the bottom line is you get 20%. That's accepted. That's a bit high, but new wind farms will generally give around 19%, and then they degrade down to maybe 16 and 17. And we've done a lot of research on that. We don't have to be too specific. But then as they get a bit older, they degrade more. Now, 20% is what you're getting your return. Whereas with the conventional generator, you're getting 100%. Do you understand that? You're getting 100%. So the problem is, we'll say the figure here, we'll go 50 million, folks. 50 million, I'm just writing it here on this. We'll say it's 50 million. You can get that paid back within a certain period of time using normal commercial accounting systems. So after we'll say 8 years, if you borrow for it or raise funds or whatever, after 8 years, you have it cleared. It's the same as tractors on farms. You know, you get about 8 great years out of them, and then they need a bit of work. And I always use an older tractor and put a bit of effort into repair, and some of my time goes to repairing it. So it'll do far more. You can get 30 years out of a tractor. Get the point? But in fact, some of them are older when they become antiques. But the point about it is that you would have it paid back in 8 years. And when it's paid back, you still have the original plinth, you still have the original building, you still have the original gantries. You might have to replace, like some of them had asbestos in the roof, you might have to replace some of that. So there is expenses in running it. But you could technically use the one place, like in Money Point and different other places down in, is it Whitegate and Cork? They're technically there forever. So the two in the Northern Ireland, Ballylumford and Killikeel, they are technically there for 800 years until someone decides to shut them down. And you can change the type of fuel and do all kinds of things. So you can keep them forever. So you don't lose anything, really. You get to understand that. It's the same with a farm of land. No matter how bad it's administered, if a new owner takes up, all he has to do is clean it up, build a few things here and there, and he's away again. The productivity of the land is not affected. With a wind farm at 50 million, you're only getting paid 20% of the time. And the result of that is quite simple. You have to pay your capital cost. If it's 50 million you paid, and the lifetime of the wind farm is 20, well, then you have to pay that back at the rate of, what's 20 into 50? Isn't that 2.5? Am I right? Yeah. So you have to pay, you have to pay 2.5 a year for the 20 years, and that'll give you the 50 million. So 2.5 million needs to be paid. The problem is the wind farm would probably give you maybe something close to 2.5 million, But you have to pay the expenses, and that includes the interest on the money. They pay nothing. Nobody ever gets paid a dividend in proper dividend, and they have to pay staff. They have to pay running costs. They have to pay insurance, and they have to pay the money that the farmers get for the wind farms. And when all of that is done, what generally happens is there's either a loss or a very tiny amount. I've checked 40 of them. I might go again when I get my computer back. It's in with the repairman, but when I get it back, I'll check it again for you. We'll do one or two again. But I've checked up to 40 of them in Ireland and the UK. And a typical example would be for that 50 million one, you'd have maybe pay your expenses, which could be maybe 2.4 million, and you have we'll say 100,000 left. You have 100k left. Do you understand that? 100k. You see, so 100k wouldn't pay the wind farm off for nearly 100,000. It would be 100 years, wouldn't it? What I found was that between 38 and 444 years, with the average payoff time around 68 years. And no matter how it goes, the wind farm won't last 58 years. So none of them can make a profit, and there's an auditor's note in all the accounts that they're being carried along by a parent company. So if they build all this offshore wind farming in off the coast of Donegal in Ireland, all of those are loss making from the start. And what was being done was there's some type of a mechanism that I'm still not sure of, whereby they sell them on the minute they're built, and some utility buys them and then take them on. The proof of that was John Lang, Glencarbury wind farm, which was making a huge loss. He had it in the paper, and Greencoat Renewables bought it over. And there's some of these big companies are that stupid, they're still buying them. So Ørsted is one big company, Siemens is another, all broke. And when Eddie O'Connor went to South America, he discovered that they wouldn't give him the same conditions as here, and he was sued. He went broke and he died, and he was being sued in the courts. They're a dead loss in South America. So what I say is there's some secret racket with the derivatives market, with the precious metals market, with various capers, egged on probably by the green left-wing government, and probably by something like USAID in America that's bailing them out. There has to be something that's bailing them out. But even with that, you have the share price of Greencoat Renewables at 80 cents on the 100. You have these companies getting into trouble, and you have failures by anyone to bid for wind farm development, because there is money in it for those who build them and sell them immediately, but the idiot that buys them, whether it's you or me, with our bank, with our ESB bill, our electricity bills, is stuck with a perpetual debt that can never be paid. And I have predicted some of the days we'll find out what it is, and when that hits the banking sector, they'll realise they have duds on their books. So if you take a wind farm cost 30 million, and they have that on their books, they don't know what the rate down value it is. When it's realised they're never getting their money back, well, what's going to happen to the lender? That's where I think that the collapse will be. But the euphoria for this is so big that they will try to put off the evil day as much as possible. And we see with Trump in America how they had been circumventing and fiddling the books all the time to keep their pet projects going. Now that brings me to the last point by Paddy Mickey, me objecting to pylons and complaining about having no internet. No internet. For a start, when the lights went out, I had my generators. I wasn't too badly off. But my problem was that the wire coming into the farm got cut. In my other properties and in a house I have, the wire comes underground on my property. But because of the layout of my farm, and I'm not too worried about it, there's just wire strung from poles, and the trees fell. Normally they'd be out long ago, but I have had no internet since the storm. So that's a cut in the wire. It's a cut in the wire. So hopefully it'll get repaired. It's too far up for me to fix it myself. It's very far up the ladder, and people warn me about going up there. I could get a cherry picker and fix it. Hopefully they'll give me a rebate. But funny enough, I have a very good reception from the air. Very, very good reception from the air. Now, so that makes the point then he's saying, well, why are you complaining about the pylons? The point about the pylons is when I went to court, and I fought this for 3 days in the High Court, and when I went to court, I read all the documentation about the North-South Interconnector. The North-South Interconnector has nothing to do with providing electricity for the ordinary people of Ireland. It's working perfectly ordinary as it is. There's no problem at all. Yes, you get a bit of a storm, and even if the pylons were up, the storm could knock them down as well. So that's the point. That doesn't matter. They're not built to provide electricity. They do have a certain amount of stabilization of the frequency of the grid. They're built to provide for 600 megawatts of wind energy in Sligo and Donegal, West Fermanagh and Leitrim. That's what's on it. I argued that in the High Court, and EirGrid didn't contest it because I had the documentation there to prove it. I had all that there. There's what it's for. It's not for to make our electricity better or to carry electricity anywhere. It's not carrying electricity anywhere. What the problem they have is that the wind is so erratic and it has no frequency regulation of its own. It's essentially no 50 hertz frequency. That it needs all this backbone to try and keep the frequency stable. It doesn't get away from the simple fact that you must have 36% of the grid fossil fuel or nuclear. It must be firm power before you can let in any wind at all. I'm the only one in the world to discover that. That's how I'm so smart and smarter than everybody else. I can see that pain. But it's accepted and not denied you. They never denied it in anything I did. This is the truth. So when you build all this cabling for the North-South Interconnector, you still need 36% of the grid to be fossil fuel because we don't have nuclear in Ireland. You still need it to keep the 50 hertz frequency stable. You have to have it. It's no option. Moreover, and this is the bigger problem, for years it was assumed by Kees de Puer, a Dutch physicist, that windmills did save a little bit of their own capacity, depending on the amount there is. That you let in a little bit, they help a bit, but if you let in a lot, they don't. And I have moved a little, that's only 4%. So if you built all this stuff out in the North Sea and Donegal and Sligo, it only saves 4% of its own capacity in fossil fuel. And this is proven, because we're still burning more fossil fuel than ever, right? But I go further to say that wind turbines are net consumers of electricity when measured over a year. And proof of that was when I woke up on that night of that storm. What night was it? It was in late January. Anyway, when I woke up and I made a video in the middle of the night because the noise of it was nothing else, I kept an eye on the wind turbines. And when the whole country was blacked out, all my parish, all the way over to Carrickmacross, all the way over into Cavan, Monaghan and everywhere else, the wind turbines were kept going because the supply of electricity from the local power station was underground. But when it comes to the Kilnalun power station near Kingscourt and the Meath Hill one near Meath Hill and Meath that brings it to the Tahard one, when it comes to those two wind farms, it comes in on a 3-phase overhead line and then it was undergrounded out. But they had to keep the power to it. The aviation lights were on. The wind farm was feathered so that it wasn't going around during the storm. But the minute the storm went to ebb, the wind farm was running again. And that shows you they had to keep the electricity into these. And I'd love to hear from anyone who lives near one. It had to get the power irrespective of anybody else. Why? Because if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have the aviation lights. You wouldn't have them facing the wind right. You wouldn't have the angle of the blades feathered right. You wouldn't have the computer control. They're controlled from Germany. You'd have none of that. They need fossil fuel, coal, oil and gas and diesel oil to survive. They would be damaged. They can't let them run amok. Even if the blades are feathered a bit, any bit, you couldn't have that in a storm. They had to get the electricity. They have to have priority on electricity. And therefore, they undoubtedly used their own. There's several studies say they use between 10% and 20% of their own capacity in fossil fuel. And I live beside them. I can hear them turning and twisting night in and night out. The bottom line is wind turbines, onshore or offshore, are utilities. They're actually the same as a washing machine, a tumble dryer, or a welder, or anything else. They must have a supply of electricity. And sometimes they produce electricity that goes back into the grid. But when you measure it over a year, the amount of electricity that comes out of the grid is less than what goes in, because they pay a reduced rate for the electricity that goes in. And they do get money for what they put in. That then is my theory on that. And the more electricity you have, the less use you get from it. You get some. But apart from that, you cannot even use it. So if you keep doubling the amount of wind energy, you can only have, there has to be 36% still fossil fuel type generation. And if you keep doubling the power, they have to turn them off and they have to pay them constraint payments, because you're limited by the amount. You cannot run the whole grid on electricity, and that's a lie. On wind electricity, that's the lie that's been told. You have to have 36% non-wind and non-solar. So as they go on to all this renewable energy, they have to keep the other there all the time, and they have to shut them off. It's there, you'll get it there, Google constraint payments, and they have to pay them for the money they can't get, because they can't sell it, because the rule is that it has to be taken into the grid. You can't leave the owner of the wind farm with no sale. If he has the wind blowing, he has to be given a sale, and if he can't let it into the grid, he has to be paid to turn it off. The whole lot of this then amounts to one thing. Not only is all that the truth, you can't make the money from them because they only produce 18 to 20% of the time, whereas an ordinary fossil fuel station produces all the time, and the amount of money it costs to build both is the same. So one has a permanent payback and the other one has only a 20% payback, and you can't break even. And this is what's rattling the brains of them. Trump sees that through. He's supposed to be doing an inquiry on it. The Bentech studies in America, you can get them there, said the same. Peltier said it. Gordon Hughes of Edinburgh University. But this is not anything to do with counting the figures, as I learned on my degree course on accounting. This is a religion. And that poor unfortunate man there, Paddy Mickey, you see, he's infected by that. No matter what you show him, he will never accept that what I'm saying is the truth. He says, oh, you want the internet, you don't want the pylons. You only need a tiny amount of electricity to run your internet. Only a tiny amount. It's about the amount of a bulb. A small bulb. A 20-watt bulb. But you do need it. That's the way they have it configured. Long ago, you could use the phone without electricity at all. There were houses that had no electricity, and they had the telephone long ago. So it's talking baloney. He's talking through his hat, but we have to deal with him. And that's how there are rich people in the world. The rich people can understand it like I can, and can apply it, and they're not feeding cows. They're out figuring out how to play the markets and all of that, and they can understand it and make money out of it, and the rest of the muggos don't have. Well, some would understand it if they got the chance, but most of them just couldn't get their head around this type of complex thing. So I hope that kind of makes it clear. This will repeat itself forever. You see, you cannot put electricity into a paper bag. You cannot put it into a shopping trolley. Oh, you put a battery and all this. You can't. And you can't see it. You can feel it, but you can't see it. It's essentially an invisible force of nature. And because of that, people think you can. I mean, I've heard statements like, once you have a windmill there and the wind is blowing around, that's fossil fuel, you're not burning somewhere else. And that now is proven nonsense. It's just unfortunate, and it's a connivance by the government. They built all these data centres which have increased demand by over 1,000 megawatts, but you can still take 1,000 from it, and we can still see that the demand for coal, oil, and gas is the same as it always was. And what's more, over in Germany, where they're taught by now that have energy windy and they wouldn't need coal, oil, and gas at all, they're strapped. It has crippled the German economy because it did two things. One, it doesn't produce the electricity you need at all of the quality you need. Two, it needs the backup from fossil fuel, not a backup, it needs 36% of fossil fuel, and it's not there for 80% of the time. So it was a sham. It was a sham. The other thing wind energy did was it deluded the Germans. It deluded the British to some degree, deluded the French and the Danes and all the rest into thinking that they had the thing cracked and solved. They thought they had the solution, when in fact they had none. It's like a person needs their car to go about to work and go to different things and marts and everything, and they think they have a car. Someone sells them a car, they never look under the bonnet, they never start it. The car is 2 years old, and when they go to drive it, they find the engine is not in it at all. They have absolutely nothing. They were better if they never had the car, because they wouldn't be deluded into thinking they had it, and the decisions they made would be made on the basis that they might need public transport, whereas they think they have a car and they don't. The Irish government, the British government, the European governments, they think that they have found an alternative to coal, oil and gas and nuclear, and in fact they found absolutely nothing. And this is why I make the point to Mickey. The SEA directive demands that this be assessed from an engineering point of view. The engineering point of view is the Irish government. Go for Eamon Ryan, a bicycle salesman, that Darrow Breen and the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach. They're the ones who decide this is how electricity works. It's not any engineer whatsoever. There is no engineer in it whatsoever. No engineer gets even writing 3 sentences. And in various public consultations to Ireland and the EU, I personally, along with others, have made our submissions. They're there and they're on the record to say this is the story, that what I'm telling you there is the case, and they rejected it. Where has it got them? Not only is their industry wrecked, the British Army at the moment, the old armies of Europe, if they entered a war with Russia, their ammunition would run out in 2 days. They have absolutely nothing. Why? Because this is what they taught. They followed this Pied Piper, leading the silly idiots up the garden path, and now they have nothing, only whinging. And when we get rid of the windmills, and I'd say with the sale of generators now, a lot of people are going to dump the electricity altogether. They might well do without it. And with a good battery pack, a good lead acid battery pack or lithium pack, it's possible that many houses could do without it, because it's no longer a reliable supply, leaving storms out of it. And I don't particularly make an issue with the storm, but for now it should be restored. We're not up to the races at all. We're not capable of doing it. Here we are talking about building a £300 million pylon racket for windmills when we can't even restore the electricity over in Leitrim and Mayo. It's a pathetic situation. I think that answers everything that was in those, and it's a bit of a long video. I wouldn't mind if you turned off, but we have to try and get this across to people. You are being made idiots of if you think that wind and solar energy works. It's an idiotic thing. It's laughable. Good luck. Bye.